I start my day off with some morning yoga and then I cycle 10 kilometers to work. At work I have a very mentally demanding job, but at lunch I go for a workout. After the workout I do the second half of the mentally demanding job and then I go to a German lesson for 2 hours. Once that's over, I cycle the 10 kilometers back home in time for my first meal of the day, which is dinner. How am I able to do all of this yet eat only once a day? I'm going to tell you starting off with an embarrassing story. At my last project, we were given food. Catering was provided, and I think in an attempt to save some money, they gave us loads of hearty meals, pastas, rices, potatoes, and so often, for the life of me, I could not stay awake after eating one of those meals. Falling asleep was made me an easy target for my colleagues, but more than that, it was really frustrating because I had no control over my own body. In my head, I needed to eat to give me energy for my day, but actually the process of digestion was using so much energy that I had none left for doing what I wanted to do at the moment, which was do my job. I recently started gardening and I know what will happen if I water my plants too much, so I was kind of doing that to my body, I think. Having lived almost a third of my life, I started to ask myself the question for the first time, how do I eat? In my research, I stumbled across a lecture by a cardiologist called Dr. Jamnadas on fasting. And it's an hour and a half. I can definitely recommend you watch it, but three key takeaways I had was that in our body, there is 50,000 calories on average stored as fat, and this will be used for energy. So when we get this immediate need to eat, thinking, I'm gonna die if I don't have food right now, that's not true. There is actually enough fat on our bodies to sustain us. The second takeaway I had from the lecture is that we don't need so much protein. This is a big one for me because I'm a bit of a musclehead and I love exercising. And for the past 15 years or so, I've believed that if I don't eat enough protein, not only will I be unable to put on new muscle, but I'll also be losing the existing one I have. So actually that was a big relief. And the last thing, which was actually the most important thing, I learned about this process called autophagy. Autophagy is like the body's janitor. Once everyone's gone home from work or school, the janitor comes out and cleans up the mess. Autophagy digests all the broken and unusable cells and recycles them into energy. But autophagy only comes on after work. Autophagy only comes on once the body's finished digesting its existing food. And if we're always in a state of digestion, this process doesn't turn on. So what I learned from that is that fasting in a way is natural because we have these inbuilt mechanisms in our body. You know the grumble you sometimes experience in your stomach and you think, oh, my belly's empty, I need to eat. That actually signifies the start of autophagy. The challenge with me was that actually I already knew about fasting and I was already intermittent fasting with a 16 to 8 hour split, meaning that for 8 hours of the day I can eat and then the other 16 I fast. Essentially I was skipping breakfast. But now I'm falling asleep at work, what else is there to do but also skip lunch? So I just started extending the fasting window by an hour each month, and yeah, until I got to the point where I eat once a month, once a day. The reason I do this is I have the most mental clarity I've ever had in my life. There's this sharpness and focus and presence in the day which I enjoy, and it lets me be focused at what I do as my job. What this means is I'm able to get into a flow state, which in turn brings joy and happiness. I'm able to control my attention for as long as I want, to the point where I've started having to regularly force myself to have breaks, because whereas before I'd get tired after lunch and have to stop, now I don't have to, and I need to implement these breaks so I don't burn myself out. If you have more calories, more energy than your body is able to burn, then you start overthinking, and the energy has to go out some way, right? So I feel that, yeah, that's a side effect that's felt as more presence, and maybe that's the result of not having all this extra energy spent into overanalyzing, being anxious, and overthinking. Well, one more thing I can think of is that when I go to bed now and my head touches the pillow, I don't immediately start thinking about the world and life and everything else, but actually I fall asleep the quickest I've ever fallen asleep. I used to think that hunger is something that needs to be immediately addressed, and that if it's not treated, it's gonna keep getting worse until I die. But actually I've kind of come to this conclusion that there's two types of hungers. There's the immediate hunger, which is kind of very loud and noisy, which is actually caused by ghrelin spikes in the body. You should check out this other video I did on it, but this comes and goes, so I call it the temporal hunger. And then the other type of hunger is a subtle hunger, so it's not so loud and it's present throughout your day, but somehow I think it's a little bit of a good thing. We've all heard the word hunger being used in a positive sense, such as, "Ooh, he's hungry," or "she's hungry, she's really driven, she's gonna go after what she wants." You still have this willingness to strive for something. At the start of this video, I asked you, how is it possible that I'm able to do all these things yet only eat once a day? It's because of fat adaptation. So my body's adapted to getting most of its energy from the fat I have stored in my body rather than the food that comes in through my meals throughout the day. Fat adaptation takes time, so don't expect yourself to change gears from eating 3 times a day to all of a sudden telling your body that, hey, now you're only going to eat once. And you need to take it slow. So I would really recommend you get more educated. Dr. Jason Fung has an excellent YouTube channel full of loads of resources. But something like a 16 to 8 hour fast, I think is pretty easy to implement for most people. It would just mean skipping breakfast, really. Today you've learned that you're not going to die if your immediate hunger is addressed, that you can use your hunger to be more present throughout the day. It's natural, and there's mechanisms in our body which turned on when we fast. I think there's a lot to talk about, especially how my belief changed about if I need to be eating protein all the time to build muscle, and actually seeing the surprising benefits on putting on muscle while fasting, which I'm going to address in the next video. So if you're interested, stick around. Thank you for spending your time watching this. Have a nice day. In my research, I found a lecture by a cardiologist called Dr. Jamnadas, and I had 3 main